There are two people sitting next to each other at a work conference. Same job title, same salary. But 10 years from now, one of them will be financially free, and the other will still be working to pay off last year's vacation. You would never be able to tell them apart today. That's the whole point. That's We've been taught to recognize wealth by what we can see: the car in the driveway, the watch on the wrist, the neighborhood, the clothes, the restaurants. But those signals are often the least reliable indicators of actual financial health. In fact, they can be the opposite of it. What actually correlates with building and keeping wealth tends to be invisible. It lives in habits, in choices, in what someone doesn't buy, and how they choose to spend their hours. These are the quiet signals, the ones hiding in plain sight. Let's start with something most people never think about as a financial asset: time. Specifically, who controls yours? Think about two people with the same income. One spends every weekend doing tasks they hate: mowing, errands, admin work, because paying someone else feels like a waste. The other pays to get those hours back and uses them to rest, to think, or to build something. Over years, the gap this creates isn't just in happiness, it's in output, creativity, and compounding opportunity. Research from Harvard found that spending money to buy free time, outsourcing the tasks that drain you, was linked to greater happiness regardless of income level. But more than happiness, it signals something deeper about mindset. When you treat your time as finite and precious, you make fundamentally different decisions than when you treat it as infinitely available. The truly wealthy don't just have more money, they have more unscheduled hours. That's not a coincidence. And ownership of time shows up in another way: in who sets your schedule. One of the least discussed markers of financial progress is the degree to which you can choose when you work, when you stop, and what you say no to. That kind of flexibility isn't just comfort, it's leverage. Now, let's talk about debt. Not the dramatic kind that makes headlines, but the quiet, ordinary kind that slowly erodes everything beneath the surface. Consumer debt, credit cards, car loans, financing deals, is like a slow leak in a boat. It doesn't sink you immediately. You keep rowing, you keep moving, but you're never quite getting ahead because some of your effort is always going toward that leak. The boat looks fine from the outside. Households carrying high consumer debt have significantly lower net worth at every income level compared to households with low debt. That's not just a correlation, it's a structural trap. Because debt doesn't just cost money, it costs options. It narrows the decisions you're able to make. Here's what's striking about actually wealthy households. Their consumer debt, the kind that isn't building equity, is proportionally far lower than middle-income households. They're not necessarily earning more at the moment you're comparing them. They've just stopped the leak. And that connects directly to something even less visible: the way wealthy people think about time itself, not hours in a day, but decades on a calendar. Long-term thinking is easy to say and genuinely hard to do. Our brains are wired for immediate reward. Choosing to invest instead of spend feels like deprivation, even when it isn't. And that gap, the gap between what feels good today and what builds wealth over time, is where most financial futures are quietly won or lost. $1 invested in a broad market index in 1980 would be worth over $80 by 2023. That's not financial magic. That's just time doing its work. Compounding, meaning your returns begin to earn their own returns, is the closest thing to a financial superpower that exists. But it only works if you leave it alone long enough. The people who genuinely understand this don't just talk about it, they arrange their financial lives around it. They automate investments before they can spend the money. They think in decades, not quarters. They are deeply, almost boringly, patient. And patience like that doesn't exist in isolation. It tends to be paired with emotional stability. And that brings us to something that might feel uncomfortable to include in a financial conversation. Relationships. This is the part of the wealth equation that almost no one talks about in financial media because it touches something personal, but the data is unambiguous. Married individuals, on average, accumulate nearly twice the wealth of single or divorced peers by retirement age. And divorce, depending on how it unfolds, can reduce individual net worth by an average of 77% compared to someone who remained continuously married. This isn't an argument for staying in a bad relationship, it's an observation about what stable, committed partnerships do structurally. Two people sharing costs, two people building toward the same long-term goals, two people with aligned incentives. The financial advantages compound just like investments do. And there's something else that stable relationships provide that's harder to quantify. Accountability. Someone who knows your patterns. Someone who asks the question you'd rather not answer. That kind of friction, the right kind, is quietly one of the most powerful wealth-building forces there is. Let's shift to location, because where someone chooses to live is one of the most revealing financial decisions they ever make, and one of the most misunderstood. There's a persistent cultural story that wealthy people live in wealthy zip codes, gated communities, luxury high-rises, the prestigious neighborhoods you already have in mind. But research into the actual residential patterns of American millionaires tells a very different story. Most millionaires in the United States live in suburbs and mid-cost zip codes, not wealthy enclaves, not the neighborhoods you'd point to as a symbol of success. Ordinary-looking streets, practical houses, neighbors who work regular jobs. The outside doesn't give it away, which is entirely the point. Living below what you can technically afford isn't deprivation, it's margin. And margin, the gap between what you earn and what you spend, is the raw material of every good financial decision you'll ever make. Without it, there's nothing to invest, nothing to save, and no buffer when life surprises you. This is sometimes called living below your means, but that framing makes it sound like sacrifice. A better way to think about it, you're buying optionality. You're keeping the future open. And what about the way wealthy people actually spend when they do spend? This is where the contrast becomes almost counterintuitive. When researchers looked at the car buying habits of American millionaires, what they found didn't match the cultural image at all. The median car purchase price for millionaires is around $35,000, and only about 23% have ever bought a new luxury vehicle. Most drive practical, reliable cars, often used. The car is transportation, not communication. This matters because visible luxury is often a signal of something other than wealth. It can be a signal of income, of earning a lot, while the underlying balance sheet quietly suffers. The person spending aggressively on displays of status is frequently doing so at the direct expense of the assets that would eventually make them truly independent. The wealthiest individuals and families, the ultra-high net worth households, allocate more than half of their assets to investments, not to consumables or luxury goods. They've made the trade consciously, less visible, more real. Which brings us to what might be the most powerful invisible signal of all: financial flexibility. Flexibility isn't a number in an account, it's a state of preparedness. It's the capacity to respond to opportunity without panic and to absorb a setback without collapse. You can't see it on someone's wrist or in their driveway, but it quietly shapes every significant decision in their life. Think about what it means to have 6 months of living expenses sitting untouched in a savings account. You can walk away from a job that's damaging you. You can take a calculated risk on something promising. You can help a family member in crisis without destabilizing your own life. That's not just financial security. That's freedom. Real, functional, daily freedom. And this flexibility is built not by earning more, but by consistently spending less than you earn and letting the difference accumulate. That sounds obvious, but the number of people who genuinely do it consistently over years is far smaller than the number who intend to. 80% of American millionaires are first generation wealthy. They didn't inherit it, they built it through exactly the habits we've been describing. Not dramatic windfalls, not insider access. Patient, consistent, often invisible behavior over time. So let's return to where we started. Two people at the same conference, same salary, same title, same outward appearance. One is quietly building toward freedom, the other is maintaining an image of it. The one building toward freedom probably doesn't look the part. Their car is practical. Their neighborhood is unremarkable. They have fewer subscriptions and a longer horizon. They protect their time fiercely and carry almost no consumer debt. They have a partner who knows where every major dollar goes. You might look at them and see nothing. That's exactly what makes it work. Wealth, in its most durable form, is not a display. It's a foundation. Quiet, unsexy, and genuinely hard to see from the outside. The real signal was never the thing you could point to. It was always the thing they didn't need to show you.